Hey there, Subway Explorers. Did you know that the underground world of subways holds some of the most bone-chilling and mysterious stories? Today we're diving into creepy subway horror stories that will make you question your next ride. Welcome back, everyone. In today's video, we're delving into the eerie and unsettling world of subway encounters sourced straight from Reddit and Facebook. Get ready to be spooked. Subway systems are not just a means of transportation. They can also be eerie places filled with their own set of dangers. Imagine the challenges faced by individuals navigating these underground labyrinths, where the line between reality and horror can blur in an instant. The man in the suit. I used to work late shifts, and my commute home involved taking the subway at odd hours. One night, as I boarded the almost empty train, I noticed a man in a well-tailored suit sitting at the far end of the car. He had a briefcase on his lap and was staring straight ahead, unblinking. As the train started moving, I felt a strange sense of unease. Every time I glanced in his direction, his gaze was fixed on me, but he never moved. At the next stop, an elderly woman got on and sat near me. She noticed the man in the suit and immediately looked uncomfortable. "Do you know him?" she whispered to me. I shook my head. "I've seen him before," she said, her voice trembling. "Years ago, on this very train. But he looks exactly the same." We decided to change cars at the next stop. As we stood up, the man in the suit finally moved, standing up and following us. Panic set in as we hurried to the next car, but he never stepped off the train. Instead, he stood at the door, watching us with those unblinking eyes until the train pulled away. The elderly woman told me she had seen the same man decades ago, always dressed the same, always on the subway late at night. She believed he was some kind of ghost or apparition, doomed to ride the subway forever. I never saw him again, but I avoided the late-night trains from that day on. The Whispering Woman. It was a late night and I was one of the last passengers on the subway. The car was mostly empty, except for a woman sitting a few seats away from me. She was muttering to herself, too quiet for me to hear clearly. I tried to ignore her, focusing on my phone. Suddenly, the lights in the car flickered, and the train came to a screeching halt. We were stuck in the tunnel, and the only sound was the woman's whispering, which seemed to grow louder. I looked over, and she was staring directly at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. She began to speak louder, and I could finally make out the words. "He's coming for you. He knows what you did." My heart raced as I tried to make sense of her words. I had no idea what she was talking about. I stood up, intending to move to another car, but the doors were locked. The woman stood up too, and her whispering became a low, eerie chant. The air grew colder, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. When I looked back, the woman had vanished, leaving only an empty seat. The train jolted back to life, and we continued on our way. When I got off at my stop, I reported the incident to the station attendant, but they found no record of any other passenger fitting the woman's description on the security footage. To this day, I don't know who she was or what she meant, but I can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is watching me. The vanishing passenger. I've always been a night owl, often taking the last subway home after my late shifts. One night, I boarded an almost empty train, taking a seat near the middle of the car. As we left the station, I noticed a young man sitting across from me. He seemed agitated, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if he were being followed. I tried not to stare, but his behavior was unsettling. He finally looked directly at me and said, "Do you see them?" I looked around, but the car was empty except for us. They're always there, waiting. They know I can see them. Before I could respond, the lights flickered, and the car plunged into darkness. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. The train hadn't stopped, and there was no way he could have left. I checked the adjacent cars, but there was no sign of him. I reported the incident to the authorities, but they dismissed it as a prank or my imagination. However, I later found out from a fellow commuter that a man fitting his description had been reported missing months ago, last seen boarding a late-night subway Since that night, I've heard stories from other passengers about seeing strange figures on the train, only for them to vanish without a trace. Some say the subway is haunted by the spirits of those who have died or disappeared in the tunnels, forever trapped in the underground. The ghostly conductor. I used to take the last train home after my night shifts. One night I boarded the train and noticed the conductor was someone I had never seen before. He was dressed in an old-fashioned uniform, like something out of the 1920s. He punched my ticket with a strange, old ticket puncher and moved on without a word. As the train moved through the dark tunnels, I began to feel uneasy. The train seemed to be moving slower than usual, and the lights flickered more frequently. I glanced out the window and saw fleeting images of ghostly figures standing on the platforms we passed, their faces pale and expressionless. When the train reached my stop, the doors wouldn't open. I panicked and went to find the conductor, but he was nowhere to be found. The few other passengers seemed oblivious to my distress. Suddenly the train jolted, and the doors finally opened. I stumbled out onto the platform, shaken. I later learned that the conductor I saw that night had died in a tragic accident decades ago. Many passengers have reported seeing him on late-night trains, always punching tickets with his old-fashioned puncher. Some believe he's still trying to finish his last shift, forever bound to the subway. The Screaming Tunnel. One night I was heading home on the subway when the train suddenly stopped in the middle of a tunnel. The lights flickered, and the car went dark. There were only a few other passengers, and we all sat in tense silence, waiting for the train to start moving again. Then, we heard it. A blood-curdling scream echoing through the tunnel. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep within the subway system. The scream was followed by the sound of heavy footsteps, getting closer and closer. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. One of the passengers started banging on the doors, trying to get out, but they wouldn't budge. The screaming continued, growing louder and more desperate. It felt like the tunnel walls were closing in on us. Just as the footsteps seemed to be right outside the car, the lights came back on, and the train started moving again. We all sat in stunned silence until we reached the next station. When I got off the train, I reported the incident to the station attendant, but they seemed unfazed. "That tunnel's been haunted for years," they said. "People hear screams all the time, but we've never found the source." To this day, I avoid that line, unable to forget the terror of the screaming tunnel, the silent passenger. As an urban explorer, I often take the subway late at night, returning from my adventures. One night, I was on a nearly empty train when a strange man boarded at the next stop. He was tall, with unkempt hair and ragged clothes. He sat down across from me, staring at me with hollow eyes. I tried to ignore him, but his presence was unnerving. He never blinked or moved, just stared. When the train entered a dark tunnel, the lights flickered, and I heard a faint whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like multiple voices speaking at once. Suddenly, the man leaned forward and whispered, "They're coming for you." I felt a chill run down my spine. The train emerged from the tunnel, and the lights stabilized, but the man was gone. I looked around, but there was no sign of him anywhere on the train. I got off at the next stop, shaken and confused. I later learned that the man I saw matched the description of someone who had died in a subway accident years ago. Some believe his spirit haunts the trains, warning passengers of impending danger. Since that night, I've been wary of late-night subway rides, always on edge, waiting for the silent passenger to return. As we wrap up our journey through these creepy subway tales, it's clear that fear and tension are constants in the underground world. The experiences shared remind us of the unknown dangers that can lurk in the shadows of these seemingly ordinary commuter spaces. Now it's your turn, viewers. Have you ever had a creepy subway encounter of your own? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling content. Until next time, stay safe and stay spooky.